Hi there. In this lecture we see Mikhail Tal against Gideon Barcza in the 1962 Varna Olympiad. So e4 from Tal, we see a French defense, d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, bishop g5, d takes e4, knight takes e4, knight bd7, knight takes f6 check, knight takes f6, knight f3, bishop e7, bishop d3, c5, and here Tal actually doesn't try and support the pawn. This would lead to issues quite often, but instead sacrifices the pawn temporarily with queen e2, and this also prepares castling queenside. It's pretty nifty. C takes d4, white castles queenside now. And black is threatened potentially with bishop b5 check and rook takes d4 or knight takes d4. This pawn is quite vulnerable. We see a6, rook he1 is played. Just for the record, rook he1 is actually more accurate than taking on d4. Black does actually have an interesting resource here, which should be at least equal. Can you spot what that is for 50 points? Okay, well, not queen takes, because bishop b5 check winning the queen. There's no way black wants to do that. But there is actually queen d5 here. Yeah, that kind of exploits the weakness of the last move, that the bishop is loose, and a2 is also a concern. And there's also g2 potentially to pick up. So this seems to be about equal if f4, queen takes a2, c3 to give bishop b1. That should be actually okay for black. So Tal's move is actually more accurate than knight takes d4 for the record. Okay. Bishop d7. Here it seems queen a5 actually might be an interesting move. It does hit a2, puts pressure on g5, and for example king b1, bishop d7, and it ties down the knight to g5, so there's no knight takes d4. So say bishop f4, knight d5. It seems this scenario, black gets to push white about a little bit, but eventually with good play, white should be able to get an edge. So knight b3 hitting the queen. As an example, white should be able to get an edge in this position, and d4 is still vulnerable. But anyway, bishop d7 was played, and now knight takes d4 here. Queen a5, so this hits g5 and a2. But an interesting move is played by Tal in this position. Can you guess what that is? For 100 points, white's play. Yep, knight f5, so it prevents queen takes g5. It's also looking to play knight takes e7 sometimes. For the record, you might be wondering about queen takes a2 here. There is actually an interesting little combination available to white. The simple way to play this for advantage though is c3, just giving bishop b1, and the queen's kind of misplaced. So this is a very simple way of approaching things, just to make sure the king doesn't even have to move. This pin is not that exploitable at all. White has an advantage. A more complicated tactical way of playing this position after queen takes a2 is knight takes g7 check, kind of aiming to weaken f6, and actually there's a possibility of queen e5 here, believe it or not, with the idea if king takes, then there's a key move in this line which is amazing in a way. What would you play here to exploit this pinned knight for 50 points? Okay, there's actually rook e4 with the idea of bishop takes a rook g4 check. So that's a great move sequence example where that's hopeless for black. The queen's got nowhere. So let's imagine king f8. Then we will take on f6 with advantage here. We're going to have a big advantage there. So yeah, that was kind of pointless to play queen takes a2, just in case you're wondering. There's at least 2 or 3 ways for advantage, the simple way or the more complex tactical way. Okay, so in the game, h6 was played. Given that's the case, we see h6. And now, it's very interesting, knight takes g7 check. So moving the king does create a kind of weakness of the last move. A kind of deflective moving away, because d7 is a bit looser. And here, d7 is made even looser now. Bishop takes f6. So removing the protection, and now hitting it with bishop c4. We see also, in this position, as well as bishop c4, knight h5 is an interesting move. For example, queen takes a2, knight takes f6. There is actually a check and a check here, and if white plays c3, then black does get the knight back, the piece back. And here, for example, bishop a4 check, bishop b5, white's edge is only a small edge. So, okay, so bishop c4 is an interesting option to knight h5 actually then, therefore, given black's got some of these tricks. Here, with the bishop attacked, we see actually queen g5 check. If king takes g7, then rook takes d7. And the thing is, the f7 pawn is pinned, so e6 is more vulnerable. So there's immediate ideas, like queen takes e6 sometimes. So, okay, queen g5 check, king b1. And now bishop b5, trying to potentially, well, it's trying to get the bishop out of the way for queen takes g7. The thing is, if the bishop goes to c6, there is a kind of weakness of the last move, neglecting e6, which is more significant than bishop b5. Can you see what white would play here for 50 points? Okay, if this was the case, knight takes e6 check, forking king and queen, so black has to take. Now threatening queen f7, checkmate. And black's on a real back foot here after f4. Queen g6, bishop d3. Things get kind of nasty after bishop takes h7. Yeah, this is a very, very nasty scenario, all a bit by force. So these scenarios are very scary. Black's the exchange down there. So bishop c6, yes, does seem to run totally into knight takes e6. So bishop b5 is much safer overall, it seems. Bishop takes b5. Queen takes g7. And now bishop a4. Now here it looks as though, hold on, what about the b2 pawn? Well, black actually played b5 first. Taking on b2, actually white's best move is similar to the game, queen e4. It makes way for possibilities like queen takes b7 and a rook left, or like this. So for example, if bishop f6, then, well, also queen takes b7 will be holding b2 as well. So there's less point to try and threaten checkmate. Because queen takes b7, hitting the rook and protecting b2. So bishop f6 in this line, rook e3 is dangerous. But it's actually similar to the main game. Yeah, this leads to a situation which, well, there's a lot of danger here after queen takes b7 and bishop b3. White is better, but it's actually not as bad as the main line of the game. White does seem to have strong attacking prospects here in any case. But things are made worse with b5. It means that there's not just an unprotected piece, but an access route is generated, this diagonal, to that unprotected piece. We see the bishop dropping back. Now bishop takes b2, which makes things even worse. The best way to play it, it seems, this is a real liability to try and protect by the queen. If something's very expensive, protecting something, the problem with that fundamentally is it's more easy to undermine if something's very, very expensive. It seems queen takes g2, even though it opens up the g file, might be the best bet for black. For example, rook g1, queen c6, this would have been a better bet. So white has the advantage, but there's work to do after. It's not that easy. It's opposite colored bishops. But with the move played, bishop takes b2, things are made a whole load worse. So queen e4 now, hits a8 with tempo. And it's a very, very difficult position. We see here rook e8, but now what do you think Tal plays in this position for 50 points? It's a really crushing check, actually. Check all checks. Queen b4 check. The first thing to point out, if rook e7, then rook d8 is checkmate. The other thing to observe now is this configuration is not clever because of a rook left, rook e3, now threatening rook g3, pinning the queen to the king. And it also happens to support c3, kind of trapping this bishop. This is extremely bad news. So black can't really handle this situation. King h7 is played. Now rook g3 first, before trying to even win the bishop. And in fact, again, c3 is a strong move, just winning the bishop essentially here. It's really lost. But rook d7 was inserted, and this is the end of the game. Black resigned. But the position is actually, for the record, really bad after c3, without even going for the king. This piece is just, dropping off. Check, taking first, taking is even better. And if a5, bishop c2 check, and then check, we can actually just go for the king hunt there, even without taking the bishop. So but rook d7 is threatening this lethal rook takes f7. Now, if the game continued from here, it's funny, but c3 not only traps the bishop as well, it also facilitates bishop c2 check, which carries on the major attack. So, in fact, if bishop takes c3, white doesn't even bother taking on c3, but plays bishop c2 check. It's completely crushing position. And if rook hg8, bishop c2 check here, and king takes b2 will do it, even though the king's safe. Winning the bishop will win there. So a kind of crushing game in the end. Some small inaccuracies seem to add up dramatically in the end, but I think it seems on the evidence, rather the evidence of kind of computer analysis from the strongest engines, that black's position was kind of made worse after bishop takes b2, rather than this kind of strange idea of snapping out the pawn and then going to c6. But it seems as though black might have been safe enough to play on after that. But in this continuation, with this bishop living on b2, it just it was a very bad idea tactically, it seems, in retrospect. But things are easy to say in retrospect. So an interesting game against the French defense. So takeaway points. Well, if you want to win with white, maybe sacrifice a pawn temporarily, aim to have opposite side castling, look for key tempo gaining opportunities like queen e4, encourage the opponent to snap on around your king, because that is a liability. There's duality to an intruder that you can munch it at some point. And yes, white's rooks are actually better than black. So there's a few takeaway points as well when we observe this game. Okay, that's too much. Hi there. Thanks for getting to the end of the YouTube video. If you would like to see other Mikhail Tal games, I actually have an amazing course for Mikhail Tal, which is currently at 4.9 with over 400 students. You can check this out from the Kingscrusher TV page. So Chess Strategy and Tactics, Mikhail Tal's amazing games. You can check out some free preview videos as well here. If you do expand all sections, you can see the preview links to get some free previews. So I hope you do check out this course index and the free previews. So I really had a thrilling time actually checking out Mikhail Tal's games. So yeah, the YouTube video here you saw was just a sample from this course. I hope you check it out. Okay, thanks so much. Oh, by the way, comments, questions, likes, shares, all appreciated. And if you did get to this part of the video, please do leave some sort of comment like Tal fan. Okay, thanks again.